everybody, and welcome back to the Couchside Judges. I'm Scott Fontana. Follow me on Twitter at Scott_Fontana.
And I'm Dan Urban. Follow me at the Dan Urban. Follow the podcast at Couchside Judges, and subscribe to us wherever you listen.
And if you love this show as much as I think you do, you're going to give us that 5-star review.
And as always, we talk judging in MMA, so head on over to abcboxing.com and read the criteria.
Dan, we don't have any actual live fights to talk about from the weekend, right?
No,
very
fights,
light
yeah.
MMA weekend, very light combat sports weekend. I think the biggest thing that I heard about really going on was Overeem against Badr Hari in kickboxing. I don't know if you caught that. I did not get to.
I didn't even know about it.
Oh, surprise, that happened.
All right.
Apparently, if my understanding is correctly, Overeem came back and won the fight in the last round.
All right.
But it was a decision. He was like down on the cards, I think. Again, I'm getting this like very secondhand. I actually didn't really dive deep into it. I don't think we were planning on talking about it, but just kind of came into me. And I think they do open scoring in Glory Kickboxing. And he was down on the cards going into the final round, and he got 2 knockdowns in the final round to overtake Badr Hari. So Overeem got the win.
Good for him.
Sounds very dramatic. I actually kind of want to check it out. I just didn't get the chance to.
Let me know how it is.
Well,
And then I'll decide based on your recommendation.
All right. I guess that works. But yeah, so at any rate, there are no live fights this weekend. We're not doing the typical contested rounds.
Mm-hmm.
But we've got a little bit of kind of everything in this episode, right? We've got a little bit of data we'll talk about. We've got a little bit of a contested round from about a month ago that was kind of brought to our attention. We've got a past judgment, and we're going to go over the upcoming UFC. So it's just about everything we do, more or less.
About
right?
a little grab bag, a little bit of everything.
All we're missing is like a guest or an interview or something, right? That's pretty much everything that we do or have ever done.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. So our next guest is no, I got nothing. There's nobody here.
It's a nice sample show.
Yeah.
You know what we do. You get
not a clip show, but a sample show.
Yeah.
Where should we start, Dan? Because again, we could kind of do a lot of everything here.
Why don't we hit that 10-8 data you have?
Okay, yeah. So as I was kind of talking about in last episode I was kind of wondering about the idea of how frequently, we're seeing 10-8s maybe given out in especially the women's MMA rounds, especially at the lighter weights, right? And I didn't know necessarily what the data said, but it was kind of just a feeling I'd had, or more or less wondering about, hey, is it harder for women, especially in the lighter weight classes, to get 10-8s, right? So I was like, okay, you told me, right? You're like, you got the data. I'm like, yeah, I guess I could. So I looked over my data, and so what I did was I took the last 3 years, just roughly 3 years, just a little more than 3 years of UFC events only, just because I have complete data from that.
Okay.
I excluded Bellator and some other events just because I don't have complete data. So it's harder for me to do that one, right? So what I did is I broke it down by each weight class, by gender, and kind of mixed, maybe grouped a couple of weight classes together too, so I could kind of look for different patterns and things. And I also did the demarcation point that we always use, the Jan Blachowicz versus Israel Adesanya. So it's kind of like a year and a half after and a year and a half before and leading up to.
All right.
Is the data that I have. So I kind of separated it out into both. That way you can really see too the way things changed in there. So there's a few things we can talk about, right? I hope I've set that up in a way that makes sense, right?
Hit us with it.
Okay. So all the data, I should also preface, consists of rounds that were scored, not incomplete rounds that we don't have. So if I'm saying there were X amount of rounds, it means they were X amount of scored rounds. Just getting that out of the way here. So the one thing that I came away with from, so let's start with the women, just because that was kind of what started this, right? I was looking at it, and I'm not necessarily seeing it drastically harder for lighter women to get 10-8s than for, like, let's say heavier women, so to speak. It's a little bit, but like no more than you would probably think based on size and that kind of thing. But the data starts to feed into the idea that, okay, the lighter that you are, maybe it could be occasionally harder to get a 10-8. So to kind of expand on that, we have in the 115 and 125 pound weight classes, right? So the two lower weight classes for women's MMA, we're only seeing 10-8s over the last 3 years, 1.5% of the time in like for unanimous 10-8s, right?
Okay.
Just for unanimous 10-8s. If there's any 10-8 in the round, we're talking about 7%. Now, granted, this also changes based on, your demarcation points, right? So before Jan Izzy, we'll call Jan Izzy just so I can reference that really quick, right? Before Jan Izzy, before JI, right? BJI. I can't. Anyway, it was more like 8.5%, like 8.25% of the time you were seeing it at any 10-8 scored. Now it's down to 5.75, right? Not too big. But at the heavier women's weight class, it was 18.75% was any 10-8 scored. So it was a significant difference before, and now the gap has closed. It's more like 5.5 to, like I said, a little under 6%, or excuse me, 7.5 to a little under 6%. So,
heavier, you mean 35 and 45?
Yeah, that would be correct. Thank you for clarifying.
There might be less fights at that weight, those weights.
Well,
so
certainly are, but we're talking about in 30 across 35 and 45 for the women. I've got 175 scored rounds versus 455 for 115, 125. A big difference, but we're not talking about the smallest of sample sizes. Like there's only 31 rounds for 145-pound women, featherweight women. I also included the weights that were at the fights that were at 140 pounds, like catch weights.
Okay.
Just to lump them in somewhere rather than do that separately, right? So yeah, only 31 rounds like that. That's why it makes them a little more sense to bring that into the fold of the 135-pound fights. That way you've got a much clearer sample size, even though it's not exact, right? It's close enough. It's the heavier women versus the lighter women is pretty much how we're breaking it down, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like that's like a pattern that kind of reveals itself too in a lot of ways in the men's fights too. At the lighter weight classes, especially at flyweight, men's flyweight. I was looking at this. There has not been in 3 years of UFC fights 140 rounds. You with me, Dan?
I'm with you. Don't even say
it.
I think I know where you're going.
How many? Here, I'll quiz you on this because you don't know anything about my data. This is all this is all on my side. You're actually learning a lot of this as we go, right? So, how many unanimous 10-8 rounds have there been at men's flyweight in the last 3 years?
I think you were about to say 0.
It is 0.
That's insane.
It is absolutely 0. There has not been a men's flyweight 10-8 round, unanimous 10-8 round yet.
Figueiredo and Benavidez didn't have one?
So no. For first off, there's points taken, right?
Okay.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about straight from the judges, no point deductions. That should also be something I should clarify. For every single round we're talking about are what the judges put down, not what was after point deductions.
Right.
And that
yeah.
kind of thing, right?
No, but I'm saying didn't Benavidez Figueiredo, the second fight, did that end in the first round or did that end in the second round?
It ended in the first round.
Okay.
It probably would have 10-7.
That
was
okay.
He finished it in the first round.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, that was what you were thinking.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Okay,
I see. Okay, yeah, no, that one, I think for all intents and purposes, that was probably the closest thing we were ever going to get to a 10-7.
Okay,
for a while, but yeah, no, that it didn't actually get there.
Gotcha.
So he managed to not get out of that round somehow. I can't believe that he got as far as he did. Really, Benavidez there, but yeah, no, we're only seeing even one judge at the minimum score a 10-8 in men's flyweight fights, little less than 3% of the time the last year and a half. Before that, it was more like 8.5% of rounds had at least one 10-8 in it. So there's obviously a big difference in the way 10-8s are being scored now that damage is more or less a requirement, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that does speak to a little bit about what I was kind of getting into last week with the idea of Mackenzie Dern, like what does she need to do to get a 10-8 kind of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because at the lighter weights, you're just not going to see the heavy damage like that very often. Yeah, we had this extreme example that you brought up. That was a good thought. But again, it didn't get out of that round. That would have been like the lone one. It just doesn't happen enough anymore. And it sucks. I don't like it. At this point now, across all weight classes and genders, man, the last 3 years, we have 3,042 rounds. last year and a half, it's almost exactly split. Like the last year and a half, it's about 1,500 rounds, 1,552. The last year and a half, 1% of all rounds across genders and weights, 1.1% to be exact, are unanimous 10-8s.
Wow.
And that's about 6.8% of rounds, 6.83% of rounds across all weights and genders get at least one.
Okay.
So there's what we have here is kind of the disconnect between the idea that, okay, you get 5% of rounds are supposed to be 10-8s, right? Roughly 5% of rounds are supposed to be 10-8s based on, that document that got circulated or put out by at the ABC, right? That's not really manifesting here.
Right. Maybe that's what they're hoping for, I suppose.
That's what the target would be. But I think the problem with that is it's too hard to get there if you don't allow judges to utilize the 3Ds in the way that they were already written. If you emphasize damage so much while de-emphasizing the idea that you can get it for, a very dominant grappling round, because that is in the criteria, that's an option. It just makes it that much harder to give these rounds. So we're not even hitting that benchmark.
Yeah. So, I mean,
we weren't really hitting it before, because before it was still only 3% of rounds that were getting 10-8s. Unanimous.
Yeah, we should be a little bit more able to, free to give those without the damage.
It absolutely needs to
written,
be.
So, because the thing is with the lighter weights, they just it's you just don't hit as hard. The damage It doesn't show. The impact doesn't show as the heavier guys and heavier females do.
Right. So, do you want to hear a little bit more about maybe the heavier weights too? So we've got control groups, right? So here's a funny thing. In the last year and a half, there has not been a single unanimous 10-8 in a heavyweight fight out of 103 rounds.
Okay, here's where I'm thinking with that.
Okay, I want to hear.
I think it's probably in the middle is where you're going to get the more 10-8s, because they can hit hard and they can wear the damage. At heavyweight, they hit so hard that they just go out, the fight ends. So that's why I think maybe we're not getting to the 10-8s for the heavier weights.
It's funny you say middle, because middle weight is in fact the peak.
Okay, yeah, so that's how
that is very funny that you say that.
That's how I would feel things would go. The lighter weights aren't getting it because it's not being perceived as high impact, and the heavier weights aren't getting it because it's so much impact, it's just ending the fight. They're not getting a chance to write 10-8.
Yeah, middleweight specific, that's where it's highest. So, but if you're doing I've been kind of grouping weight classes in pairs, right? So 25-35 for the men, 45-55, 160, which counts as 170 to 85, and then 195 counts as 205 all the way up to heavyweight. I grouped those men's weights together, and it's that welterweight middleweight combo that is the heaviest the last, like I said, year and a half. Before that, though, before the demarcation point, you actually saw it much more common at lightweight and featherweight. Those were the most common weight classes for you getting your 10-8s unanimously.
Okay.
And it does more or less bear out the same way too when you're just looking at one round at a time or not, right? Like just one judge, getting a 10-8 here.
Okay. Yeah.
Funny enough,
pretty interesting.
So in the year and a half before Jan Izzy, give me the one weight class that you think had the most rounds with at least one 10-8 round, percentage-wise.
I would.
Men's or women's, whatever.
I would think 170, 155. There.
It's women's bantamweight.
Wow.
Roughly one out of every 5 women's bantamweight rounds in the year and a half before Jan Izzy was at least one 10-8.
Okay.
But I think what that tells me is that there's just such a disparity in terms of the quality of the opponents at 135 and in the women's side.
Okay.
And 145 too, because it's a much smaller sample size. There's only 31 rounds, but it's also pretty high. It's like 14%, and then the other one's 19%. So those are 2 of the 3 highest. Featherweight was the highest at that point.
Interesting.
I'm throwing a lot of numbers out there.
This is a lot of numbers,
weight classes around. It can be kind of hard to wrap your head around a lot of this stuff. So I hate throwing too much numbers out. I hope I'm not overwhelming our listeners.
The basic, what I'm getting is the summary is basically ever since damage has become almost a necessity to go 10-8, they've gone down.
It's heavily slashed how often they're given out. It's heavily, especially from a unanimous standpoint.
Okay. And
that's the key thing.
And it definitely hurt the lower weight classes more so.
Yeah, I would say so. Because yeah, if you look at the difference between, we're going to go with unanimous 10-8s for the lightest men's weight classes, 25-35.
Mm-hmm.
484 rounds. This is a lot of rounds, right? It was beforehand, out of 218 rounds, it was 1.83% of the time you were getting a 10-8 at the latest men's weight classes. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Still a small percentage, but obviously it's happening. It dips all the way down to 38 hundredths of a percent.
Wow, that's
Since then.
yikes.
So what that means is it's pretty much, it's cut about 20% of, it's 20% of what the original number was, more or less.
Mm-hmm.
It's significantly smaller. It's just like, it basically just doesn't happen now.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And I get it. Like they, more often than not, damage is probably just going to be a part of it anyway, right?
Right.
That's kind of a natural thing. But you're really shutting off the ability to give the 10-8s in what I like to call different rounds, more or less. Like no judge is scoring it saying, oh, it was a different round. Like I get that. That's not how it works. That's not how it's written. That's not how it's practiced. That's not how it's taught. But it's just not happening. Like we're seeing rounds that are like, man, that was a big round. And when you walk away from a round saying that was a big round and it's still just a 10-9, it's like, come on. Like, why can't we allow the scoring system to let judges score those rounds as differently scored rounds?
Yeah.
Whether it's the way it's written in the language or the way it's, I don't want to say enforced, but let's say the way that commissions like to see it, certain commissions like to see it. I would like to see them just allow the judges to judge.
Yeah. Just
if they see a round that's got 2Ds checked, because the language still says it's 2Ds. They haven't passed any legislation,
2Ds.
Then let them do it.
That 2Ds must. There we go. Bam.
It should be 2Ds must. I would be much happier with that.
Mm-hmm.
Even because if it was like, let's say right now, the way judges are giving it out, let's say you're giving every single round that any judge thought was a 10-8. Let's say it becomes an automatic 10-8. You're still only getting 10-8 rounds 6.83% of the time that way, because 6.83% of rounds have at least one 10-8 across all weights and genders and everything, right? That's not that high,
Isn't, no.
It's really not that high.
Yeah, interesting stuff.
And that's the current rate, not the last 3 years, but the last year and a half. That's cut just about in half from what it used to be. Before it was like 11.21% of the time. Now it's again dipped down under 7%.
Yeah.
So. And actually, in the men's weight class, again, the last year and a half, it's just about 7%. Whereas for the women, it's more like 6.25. So not drastically different necessarily.
No, not
so
really.
So I would say, I think it's probably fair to say that the men's weight classes are not judged significantly differently than the women. I think it has more to do with the weight itself.
Okay.
I don't think necessarily that it's judge sitting there saying, well, it's a woman, like I don't see a bias. I don't see a gender bias in here. I see a weight bias.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
I could totally understand that.
Not that I was necessarily thinking there was a gender bias necessarily, but it was just the idea was, again, it got me kind of thinking just because it was that particular round and
well, yeah, the thing is we kind of have that maybe it's a misconception that, women's strawweight tends to go to a lot more split decisions than.
Well, there's also that too, yeah. But why do they go to a bunch of split decisions? Because all the rounds are 10-9s.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that could probably help cut down on that if you allow them to go 10-8 a little bit more liberally. So
yeah, I'm telling you, man, I really love our CSJ scoring. It's not that the commissions need to be like, all right, just do what those guys on that podcast say. I get that.
It's not perfect, but it works.
But I'm telling you, man, there's something to allowing for a little more variety in the scoring.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see a problem with that.
Yeah, I got no issue with that.
Well, of course you don't. We came up with it. Oh, we're not the first, obviously, but yeah, I think, and it's, if you were to expand it to, let's say these, 5 to 6% of rounds that we're getting now that have a 10-8 in them, let's call those 10-7s. Just all those are 10-7. Then we find some sort of demarcation point for that other group of 10-9 rounds and say some of them can be called 10-8s.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't know what the percentage is. Even I always say 20. That way, 75% of the rounds are 10-9 and then 25% aren't. But
yeah,
even if it was 10, Even if it was another 10%, we're different. Like that makes a big difference.
Yeah, that narrowing what 10-9 is, I think, is the start. So
Yeah. Overall, out of 1,552 rounds, all weights and genders, the last year and a half, how many unanimous 10-8s do you think we've had? Pull a number out.
2.3%.
No. I'm sorry. Pull like a round number. The number of times it's
okay.
occurred.
Out of 1,100 and how many?
Out of 1,552.
85.
17.
Wow.
Yeah. 17 times all three judges said, yep, that's a 10-8.
Wow.
In the last year and a half in the UFC. That's it.
Oh my.
Not even one a month.
Okay, I guess that's why we do quite a few 9-8 splits. Now that I think about it, yeah.
Yeah.
Every card we have a couple usually. Well, not every card.
Sure. No, I mean we get a bunch. So if you want to do the math on that, right? So we're saying there's 17 on it. There are, I will tell you, there's 106 rounds that had at least one.
Okay.
So you do the math. We're down to what is it? It's 89.
That's it.
89 9-8 splits in the UFC the last year and a half. That's what we've done. 89.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds about right.
Mm-hmm.
That's like, I think there's more actually. I would think there's more.
There's more.
I would think there's more.
Oh, I see.
But
my data is pretty solid.
Yeah,
don't question me.
It's shocking, is what I'm getting at. It's like
no.
Really, that's it. There we go. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. I'll have to show you my little spreadsheet that I've made here that you can look through yourself.
I have the spreadsheet. I gotta find it though.
No. I made this. This is in an Excel sheet that I was working on.
Oh.
And that's not in
this
in
is
the
something
Google,
completely
but I can
different.
share that with you in the Google.
I gotcha. Oh, okay.
The Google.
Gotcha. All right.
Like an old man. See what the Google says.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah. I mean, that's more or less.
Yeah, I think we threw enough numbers at the listeners.
Yeah, I apologize. Yeah, I mean, you're listening on the other side. Like, do you think it got a little overwhelming? Do you think I was clear enough?
No, once we got into it, I thought it was pretty interesting.
Okay.
I think.
Yeah, it's tricky. There's a lot of numbers here. There's a lot I could kind of go with, but I think I kind of hit the main bases and hopefully the main point.
Maybe you'll be presenting next year at the ABC. Present this data.
Yeah. I'm sure they'll ask me.
I would ask you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. But you're my friend, so it's a little different. I don't know. We can move on though. We like I said, we've got other things we want to talk about for this show. And if anybody has any questions about the data or anything like that, or comments or on kind of what it reveals, happy to answer any questions anybody's got. You can hit me up. So let's move on. We do have, like we said, we've got a contested round. It's not from this weekend. It's from a little more than a month ago, Dan. And this round was brought to my attention as part of the EMMAA having their I guess, what is it called? Infrequent would probably be the way to label it. Infrequent meetings. I think it's like every month or two.
Sporadic.
That they'll do that. I don't know how often they do it. I mean, they do it as often as I think they can, right? But I think it's usually every couple months is how it ends up working out, right? So what they did is they do kind of the same thing that California started doing during the pandemic. They'll get a bunch of officials on. They'll talk about, rounds from an officiating standpoint, whether it's judging or refereeing. And they do it, it's mostly European officials. I'm pretty sure just about everybody I sat on the call with was from on a different side of the Atlantic than myself. But it was interesting. It was fascinating. They brought up some good rounds. It was all like, European rounds, typically like Cage Warriors, more or less. This one coming from Aries FC, in particular, Aries FC 8. Now I'm going to butcher these names, so I'm apologizing in advance, but Aliun Nahaya got the win over David Toniatua. Yeah, definitely screwed that up. Kroll, right?
Yep.
I'm just destroying their names, and I'm so sorry. But Nahaya got the win by majority decision in this fight about a month and a half ago, or a little more than a month ago, I guess. It was the day before UFC Paris in Paris, right?
Yeah.
But this was a weird fight, and they brought up 2 rounds from it during the EMMA meeting. So we watched them both, but I thought round 2 was the one that had the most conversation come out of it. So it was suggested to me, hey, why don't you bring that to Dan? We could talk about it maybe.
All right.
And so let's do it. Yeah, I had you watch it, and you were probably like, all right, why am I watching this round? And then you watched it, and I think you really understood exactly why we watched this round.
Yeah, it was kind of insane round.
Yeah. So go over it. Make sure everybody understands.
Really wild.
This is a round most people haven't seen, probably.
Yeah, wild round. It's on YouTube. if you want to go watch it. I suggest you do because it's crazy.
It is. It's worth your time. It's especially if you're interested. Look, if you're listening to our show, you're interested in officiating, right? So watch this round.
Yeah. So Kroll gets a double leg, and Nahaya attacks a guillotine. Once it hits the ground, Kroll moves to side control and attacks a Von Flue. And I think it's a pretty solid Von Flue attack. As Nahaya is trying to escape, it looks like he's getting desperate. He's bucking pretty hard. But then Kroll loses the sub and transitions to mount, where he doesn't do much until at all, really. The referee even warns him, like, hey, we got to work here. Nahaya gives his back, and when he does this, Kroll attacks an armbar. It's pretty deep, but then Nahaya drops him on his head, which I want to point out is 100% legal because he was attacking a sub. When someone's attacking a sub, you can slam them on their head.
Good call.
So once he slams him on his head, he lands a couple shots here. They get back to the feet, and Nahaya is really picking him apart.
Just blasting him. Good
body shots, big front kicks to the face, head kicks, strong punches. And it looks like this may be heading towards maybe a finish, maybe a 10-8 if it continued. But Kroll just continues to walk through these punches, and it gets another takedown and immediately takes the back, locks in a tight rear naked choke for the better part of a minute. It's really a strong sub attack, I think.
Super strong. Super strong. We'll talk about that more.
While this is happening, Nahaya is defending by, grabbing the gloves, which is illegal, and ends up getting 2 points taken from him in the midst of this.
And the referee is shouting them out as it's going. He's not stopping the action. He's not doing it. He's just shouting out. It's like point. It was very unclear too, right?
If it wasn't for the commentary, I wouldn't have known what was happening.
Yeah, it's very, very unclear the way it was kind of.
Yeah, they said he
got it out, right?
Yeah, they said he speaks French, and they were translating for him for the viewer at home. So makes sense.
Sure.
Anyway, I do end up this fight, and the round ends here with him on the back attacking the choke. I end up scoring this round for Kroll because I think in the end he's the more effective fighter. I think his offense is closer to finishing the fight. After that,
with that choke, right?
Yeah. After that round, the fighter I'd rather be would be Kroll. As solid as these strikes that Nahaya landed, Kroll wasn't wobbled, rocked, and he just kept coming forward. The impact is there, but I just don't think the effect is more than what Kroll did in the grappling department. And when you couple that with the Von Flue choke, because I thought that was also a really solid attack early.
It's such a wild round. I did go the other way. I did go for the more the striking based damage, right? But I mean, I get it. I totally get why you'd go the other way on this round. And it was split. The judges were split on this one, right?
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, you're scoring at 10-9 Kroll. I'm scoring at 10-9 Nahaya. We're not accounting for the points lost.
Yes.
So what you really have ultimately is a 10-7 for Kroll, and I have a 9-8 for Kroll.
Yeah. Which is,
but we both ultimately have it as a Kroll round after the point deduction.
Yeah,
right?
Which after the points are on the fighter, but
sure. But the way the points are kind of given out too, the way it was handled was just very strange. Like it just, I think they did the absolute right thing in not stopping the fight. Right, that to let it continue. You don't want to interrupt what Kroll's doing because ultimately you want him to be able to win the fight in a position that is advantageous to him. But yeah, I mean, the grabbing the gloves, like it's got to stop. I just wonder if it was made clear enough necessarily. I mean, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, but the referee speaks French, the fighter speaks French. Like they can communicate that the language barrier is not necessarily a problem there.
Who knows? In the heat of the moment, he might not really be listening. He's just trying to protect his neck as best he could. Who knows?
And it's tough, right? Because like he's pretty much, he's almost blatantly cheating, right? Like, is he sitting there trying to be a cheater? Maybe not, but like he's doing something, strictly illegal, and he is being punished for it. But it's almost like, man, like at what point do you start just saying, well, you've lost the right to win?
Well, if
you could you take a third point?
So I think I mean, I can be completely wrong. I don't know the correct answer, but isn't it you take 1 point, second point, third strike, you're out kind of deal?
I don't remember that being distinctly gone over from when we went to training.
Yeah,
but I
mean, how many points?
I guess you'd have to make it abundantly clear to the fighter, like hey, what's going on? Because the points were taken in such rapid succession. It would be a shame if it went 1, 2, 3 in like the span of like 5 to 10 seconds without the fight even being stopped.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you've lost here. I don't know. It's a tricky situation, right? Like it's
kind of crazy.
Very hard. And this is exactly why this round was brought up, for not just a judging but an officiating standpoint.
I mean, can you
refereeing standpoint?
That's one question we should ask too. Is 10-6 even a score that can be put down?
I mean, in theory,
the judge wouldn't put it down, but is that an actual round?
If you have a 10-7 round and a point was deducted, then yeah, it's a 10-6. It's easy.
I guess.
Yeah, that's totally fine. What if somehow
kind of
John Phillips, when he was struggling to do literally anything against Khamzat Chimaev a few years back, what if he, blatantly just pokes Chimaev in the eye? Like he just does like a Three Stooges, like right in the eyes, right?
I think he gets DQ'd for that.
Well,
he probably gets DQ'd for that.
I mean, I guess it depends if Khamzat can continue or not, right?
Yeah.
But because that's really what it is. Like, can the fighter continue?
It might be a 10-5 then.
Yeah, let him go.
Be a 10-5.
Be a 10-5, yeah.
Yeah.
From the one judge, and 10-6 from the other two.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. There's a lot of this. There was a lot of conversation off of this round. This was a very involved conversation. A lot of people weighed in. A lot of people in the EMMA meeting that we sat in on, or that I sat in on. I'm not going to be able to cover it all at this point. I didn't take heavy notes. I was more or less just kind of listening to learn. I took away what I hoped I could.
Did they do the vote thing?
Excuse me?
Did they do the poll thing that ABC does after?
Not the same thing as them. What they did was, you just, in the chat, you would just put your score.
Oh, okay. What was there a?
I want to say the predominant score was probably for Kroll. I think they saw it the same way as you, but it was also the minority score that night.
Yeah. And then there must have been a 10-8 in another. I didn't watch any other rounds. So I probably should, because it was kind of crazy fight. There must be.
If I recall, the first round was like a
huge
huge round for Nahaya.
Okay.
And it was. I watched this like several weeks ago, so I'm not really remembering that round. But I'm pretty sure that was the only debate, was whether that was like a 10-8 or a 10-9.
Got you.
Yeah. So that was a big round for him. Ultimately, like, he kind of does better in most of the other rounds, but yeah, I mean, this round, like, realistically, I could see why you could say, like, if you wanted to say, like, hey, he looks like he's almost done from this choke, whether he's cheating or not. That makes a lot of sense. And obviously, if he's at the point of cheating, like, yeah, that's probably a really effective
it was
maneuver. Not necessarily, but
like, it was completely under the chin. There was nothing there.
So I can get it. I can totally get why you'd go there. I did go the other way. I don't feel like that's the only way to see this round, but I did go the other way. Yeah,
I mean, these up kicks or the front kicks to the face, like, how many are you gonna land here? There were so many of them, like 3.
But ultimately, this is definitely a round that I would encourage any of our listeners who hadn't watched it yet. I really hope you do go watch it. Especially because it is a wild round. I mean, shoot, Dan, watch the whole fight too if you get a chance. You probably only skipped to the round we were going to talk about, but watch the whole fight. It's a fun fight,
Yeah, very interesting from a score.
It's very interestingly handled, both from refereeing and judging. I don't necessarily fault the ref in the way he took the points, and maybe just in the way he can alert the fighters. Maybe tap them in some way and just let them know, like, you're losing a point here. Just to get their attention better. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's a tough thing. It's because you don't want to interrupt what's going on.
Yeah, for sure. Not in a situation like that.
No, but I think that probably covers that round, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's move on. We're kind of flying through here, hopefully, and let's go to past judgment, man.
Yeah, let's do a little past judgment.
Yeah, we and we're kind of dipping back. Roughly the same. It was actually the same year as the last one that we did. But why don't you, before we do that, before I introduce the fight, why don't you introduce what it is that we do for past judgment?
Yeah, we score using the ABC criteria based on effective striking and grappling and the 3Ds, damage, dominance, and duration. But we just stretch the definitions of 9s, 8s, and 7s a bit. A 10-9 is a round where neither fighter checks off a D to a strong degree. A 10-8 can be considered for 1D but must be given when 2 Ds are achieved. A 10-7 can be considered for 2 Ds but must be given for all 3. The rare 10-10 is for partial rounds and basically staring contests. We've eliminated effective aggression and area control because these are extremely rare for judges to use anyway. All right, Scott, set it up. Brock Lesnar versus Heath Herring.
Yes, indeed. Like I said, this was 2008. It was the co-main event from UFC 87, heavyweight fight, of course. Target Center in Minneapolis. The headliner was George St. Pierre and John Fitch for the welterweight title. We talked about that fight on a previous episode, actually, and we both scored that one 50-40 for GSP in past judgment scoring.
Yes, that was a beatdown.
It was a beatdown. It was a fun beatdown. It was a competitive fight in the sense that things were happening, but yes, it was very much things were happening for GSP.
Yeah.
Mostly. Herring comes into this one. He's actually the younger guy here at 30, but he already had 41 fights on his 42 technically on it. 42. Yeah.
Imagine being 30 and having 42 fights.
Yeah, well, it was a different era, man. They fought it a lot of it was a different time, you know.
Exactly.
That.
They fought.
Yes, I know. They fought 4 times a year.
Yep.
Or more, just the way you want. But yeah, he was 28-13 with 1 no contest. He was a Pride veteran, as we all know. Split his first 2 UFC fights leading up to this one. The latest was a decision victory over Czech Congo 5 months earlier. Lesnar, 31, so not much older, but he was older. He had just lost his UFC debut 6 months earlier in his second pro fight, mind you. Much more well-known as the WWE superstar and former NCAA wrestling champion. Still kind of a novelty act, more or less, at this point. He hadn't proven himself beyond anything else in MMA yet.
Just a pay-per-view draw.
Just a pay-per-view draw, but you know, he was heading to different things. Granted, even in that loss to Frank Mir, he had a lot of success in that fight before he lost to the knee bar, right?
Right. Then he got a point deducted in that fight too for
did he?
Strikes?
I don't think so.
Or he got stood up on the ground because he was striking the back of the head.
Is that what it was? Maybe that was what it was.
Mazzagatti was the referee.
It's such a kinetic 90. I think it's 93 seconds long. Okay. So like I should just go watch that. Maybe I'll watch it after. I've got time. Judges for this one are Doug Crosby, Jeff Mullen, and Cecil Peoples. Referee Dan Mergliotta. And unfortunately, we do not have individual round scores, but we can again promise that Brock Lesnar won every single round. So we're just looking at degrees of victory, starting with round 1. What happened in round 1?
Round 1. Let me point out in the lead up, Heath Herring says Brock Lesnar is just going to sprint across the cage and try to tackle me. That's basically what he says. And well, Brock does just that, except he tries to throw a little wrench and he throws a flying knee, misses completely.
Hey, it was a good way to fake him out, give him what he's sort of expecting, but in a different way.
So they square up and Brock lands a huge right hand, dropping Herring back. He rolls backwards. Then Brock does try to spear him at this moment. They end up in a little bit of a scramble where Brock has like a front headlock against the cage standing.
Against the turnbuckle, yeah.
Yeah, no real guillotine attack here. I just kept on I was like, wow, his arms are so big. He's just going to pop this guy's head off. But no, he didn't really attack the guillotine here. They separate and Lesnar almost immediately gets a double leg. And from here on out, it's total domination. Herring's eye is a bloody mess. This is the first time we actually get to see it because he was stuck in a headlock where there was no camera on it. Almost swollen shut. Brock continues to pound him from top turtle position. Herring's desperately trying to regain some kind of guard. Brock's having none of it, and I think he's just big brothering him the whole thing. I think we got all 3 Ds here. I think we got damage, dominance, and duration. I think duration's is a bit questionable. So I'm on 10-7. Lesnar.
Yeah, duration was the one that I had the most trouble with because especially after he lands that big punch, right? Which obviously doubles him back, and he's not he's knocked down, but he's also not like flash knocked down and like back in it. Like he's tumbling over and he's not okay for like a little bit, but nothing happens after that point for a while. They're stalled at that cage position, and it's like, man, if you can only give me a little more. I did put 10-8, but I'm actually going to change my score. Right now, because what you did was when you pointed out the fact that his eyes all busted up and everything, like, you know what? There's some good physical damage there as well. I am going to go for the 10-7 as well. I think it's okay. It's okay to go for the 10-7 here, but I think it's still more of a borderline round.
See, I think we're good here. I think Brock he's dominating him in this grappling, even though he's in a turtle position. This is a dominant position. I think he's landing some good shots from here. I think Herring's in a world of trouble. It's just I think duration is the one that's in question, though. So.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I mean, again, we kind of ended up in the same place, but I think I was giving less weight to the eye there, and
Okay.
we can give a 7 for 2Ds.
Yep.
We can do that. And I was on the side of not doing that, and now I think I am. I'm still very
All
iffy
right.
on duration, but I think I'll over to the 7.
Okay.
So
Fair
we are
enough.
on the same page now. So what about round 2?
Brock actually tries to take down right away, shockingly, and Herring actually defends it. He shoves him away. The first attempt. Brock throws a leg kick and then decides, well, you know what, I'm just going to take him down, and he does.
Yeah.
Almost a repeat kind of round 1. He's again dominating the ground. He gets to side control. Heath scrambles. Brock keeps him in turtle, landing a shot here and there. Some good knees to the body. Brock briefly transitions to the mount. No real damage from here. I think this is a round that Brock dominates the grappling transitions, landing more offense. Herring's not doing anything but defending. Ends up back on the feet somehow, and Brock clinches him against the cage. Lands some solid knees to the body before returning back to the mat in turtle position, which was a majority of where this fight took place. I didn't think the damage was high enough in this round for me to go to the 7, but it's one-way traffic. It's dominance. I'm 10-8 Lesnar.
Yeah, so I think we do have dominance and duration.
Okay.
I think that's pretty clear because really Heath Herring does nothing. He's pretty much caught in these dominant positions for most of the fight, most of the round, right? But yeah, I was iffy on the damage level as well. I think I could see an argument for getting there in our system, but I think this round just doesn't seem to quite the same degree as maybe the last round was.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I think when you just we'll get to that.
Maybe we'll get to that. We're talking about it now.
My thoughts on round 1.
Oh.
When we
talk about round 1. What are you talking about? I'm lost.
When we speculate which round was the 10-8.
Oh.
Yeah, the real 10-8.
Now I'm with you, sir.
Gotcha.
We're there. It's like, what's he talking about? Yeah, and it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier with the idea of, rounds being different, but like maybe not necessarily up to the, if we applied our scoring to, real life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Something like the first round, the first one is more, it can get there, right? It can get to that like 5-6% level of round, but whereas something like this is still a round that's distinctly different from your average 10-9, but it's not quite at that level that you would probably give a 10-9 to, I don't think, or 10-8 to in the current scoring format.
Yeah, it's a round that feels like it's worth more than just going up 1 point.
Exactly. So yeah, we're on the same page. We both now have 20-15 for Lesnar.
Mm-hmm.
About round 3.
Round 3, Brock comes out, lands a nice body kick. Then they clinch, and Heath he's fighting a little bit here. He's throwing a couple body shots, but Brock folds him down to the mat like a lawn chair, and they stay there. I think they're both pretty tired at this point. Brock briefly mounts him, but mostly like basically the story of this fight is Brock winning in top turtle position, landing knees, some punches here and there. I just don't think he really did much because I think he is gassed in this round. He kind of just held position mostly, then trying to end it, but it's still a one-sided affair. It's still dominance, and I'm on 10-8 for Lesnar.
Same here. I have the same score. I think, yeah, this is a round that feels much more like round 2 in the sense that it just didn't quite get over the hump to get to any of that level. But yeah, I mean, there's no two ways about it. This is like a very no-brainer round for Brock Lesnar, as opposed to even entertaining the idea that, hey, maybe Heath Herring did something here,
Yeah, Herring, no, just not his night.
No, well, it wasn't his night.
I mean, he also said he's faced stronger wrestlers than Brock Lesnar, and no, there's no one stronger than he's ever faced than Brock Lesnar.
Stronger in wrestling,
no, just stronger.
Stronger. I see.
He's never faced a stronger human being than that. That I don't even know his full resume, but there's no one stronger than that.
Now that it's talking about resumes, I've got to pull it up. I'm going to do a quick scan. I know a lot of names. I don't know every single name.
Did he ever fight Bob Sapp?
He's career banned in 1997. I was 11 at the time, so we're gonna just kind of scan for names I do recognize, and I'm like, well, is any of them stronger than Brock Lesnar? I mean, he fought the Smashing Machine, Mark Kerr.
Was he strong?
Probably not as strong as Brock.
No.
Yeah, not seeing anybody. Sam Greco. He's the one who invented Greco-Roman wrestling, right? No, kidding. I know that. No, I don't. I think that's I don't know. That's probably a load.
That was
Probably a I'm smelling something pungent. It doesn't smell good.
He was trying to hype himself up.
I think so. But nonetheless, we ended up here both 10-8s in this round, which gave each of us the final score of 30-23 for Brock Lesnar. And we do have all three judges on the same page as well, 30-26 for Lesnar. Now, we don't know that they all gave the same round a 10-8. We just know that each of them gave a 10-8. So, for argument's sake, let's say, what do we think the judges said was the 10-8 round? What do you think?
Round 1.
I would say so. I mean, based on the way we scored it, we would have to think that they did too. If it wasn't round 1, which round was it?
2.
Yeah, I think so too.
They're
petering out in the last round, right? And there is ever so slightly more offense.
Yes,
from
just a
Heath
tad bit more.
Back. So it's the round where you can at least say, well, he did something as opposed to nothing.
I think he even threw one of those back elbows out of like desperation. Like, hey, let me just hit you with something.
Yeah. So now that's a round we would need to get the information from, if it hasn't been destroyed, from Minnesota or maybe the UFC, but it's probably not worth digging that one up. I can think of other better uses of my time in digging up information like that than finding out which round Brock Lesnar got the 10-8 in a fight from 14 years ago.
Yeah. So,
but that is it. That's it for past judgment. Let's kind of look ahead to the next weekend. We've actually got some live UFC action as opposed to, again, 14 years ago UFC action.
Yes. We're back with fights this weekend. Early, I think it's earlier card. 7 p.m.
7 p.m. main
4
card.
p.m. Yeah, 4 p.m. prelims.
Okay.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, it's always nice.
Who we got?
We have, it's headlined by Alexa Grasso and Viviane Araújo.
Okay.
How do you like this one?
Guess it's going to help it shape out that division a little bit more.
It's kind of one of those necessary fights. I don't necessarily think it's the most fascinating of Fight Night headliners, but there is at least there are some stakes here to some degree. So I like that. There's the potential that one of these women could be, whether they're next or not, or the next after next to face Valentina Shevchenko for the title. Who knows?
Do we have a next yet?
Shevchenko, I don't believe she has a fight booked.
Okay, so this might be it.
It could be. Yeah. I mean, I imagine if nothing else, the UFC will sell it as a possibility.
Yeah. They're putting it as a headliner over a card where Brandon Royval and Askar Askarov are on.
Yeah, but they almost never put men's flyweight fights on as the headliners. It's like, for whatever reason, I feel like that one gets even less than like any other weight class, and I don't really know why, because I think they're freaking awesome.
I mean, we also got Cub Swanson on the card too.
That's true. Cub's going against Jonathan Martinez.
Yeah,
and it's at 135 too. I believe it's Cub's bantamweight debut, right?
Really?
If I'm not mistaken.
Okay. I thought he fought at 35 before, but I'm not. You're probably right.
If he did, I think it was early in his career. But I don't. I mean, most of the time they were fighting up in weight rather than lower in weight because he's from a different time too, right? So no, I'm almost positive he hasn't. I'll double check as we're talking here. But
no, you're right. You're right, because his fight before he lost to Giga, and then he got a knockout win over I don't recall who, but
a knockout win over Darren Elkins. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, there we go. So yeah,
nice spinning wheel kick.
So yeah, this will be his 35 debut. Interesting.
It certainly looks that way. I'm scanning. Yeah, I think he started at 45 or started at 55, went down to 55 not long before he jumped to the WEC when WEC was still in its early-ish days, I guess. For was it even? Yeah, his debut was for WEC, but was it when WEC had Zuffa ownership or not? I think so. Yeah, I believe so, but I'm not sure. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think Jonathan Martinez is on like a pretty good win streak too.
John Martinez, I like this fight. It's a fun fight.
Yeah.
I think it's probably a tough fight to headline anymore. Not that Cub doesn't have any value as a headliner, but it's I think Martinez maybe doesn't bring as much in, and there's very little stakes here is really what it comes down to too.
This is kind of a test for Martinez. It's a step up.
It's more of a test for Martinez and say like, hey, how can Cub do down at 35? He's 38 years old. Can he reinvigorate his career in any meaningful way, or is this just like, hey, he's giving it a try at the end? I think he's going to want to have to prove that, right?
Yeah, he's doing the Aldo and the Frankie Edgar route.
I really do like that Royval and Askarov fight, though.
That's going to be crazy. It's always
fun. I know you love Brandon Royval.
Brandon Royval, bonus for Royval.
Bonus for Roy.
Just-
I enjoyed my chat with him last year. Great to talk with him again. He's a fun guy to talk to. So yeah, I like that fight. And I also think, granted, this is someone who actually has a win over Car France,
Yeah.
who just fought for the interim title.
Mhm.
I don't see why someone who's now 4-2 at flyweight in the UFC has basically only fought really awesome guys and is now ranked 5th overall, one behind Askarov. I don't see why either of them couldn't break through. Pantoja's next, right? Like he's next after Figueiredo and Moreno figure it out maybe in this 4th fight, or maybe they'll fight 8 more times. I don't know. Pantoja really should be next.
Mm-hmm.
After that, I think the winner comes out of this fight.
Yeah, it's going to be...
But when would that be? Maybe they have to fight one more time, you know?
Yeah, it's going to be fireworks for however long it lasts.
I think so. I'm super hyped for that fight in particular. Of all the fights, it's the one I really want to watch. And then Rafael Sunsao, he's still going. He's in this one.
Victor.
Drawing Victor. We're only talking about men and women who are 125 or 35 pounds. So we're not expecting too many 10-8s.
Yeah, exactly. It comes around full circle.
Yes, indeed.
And I want to point out, this is episode 209, and no episode 209 would be incomplete without someone from that crowd fighting. Nick Maximov is on this
I was
card
wondering if you would actually
also.
mention him. I was leaving that on the table for you to see if you pick it up.
He's there. He's fighting Robert Whitaker protege, right? Let me find out.
Is he Jacob Malkoun?
Jacob Malkoun, yeah. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he trains. I've heard that before.
Yeah, it's a bunch of prospects and stuff on this card.
Could be interesting. The way he fought his last fight with the grinding style, it could be interesting how these two match up.
Yeah,
we'll see.
I don't know. I don't love the card on the whole, but I'm actually very interested in especially those last 3 fights.
Yeah, me too.
Mm-hmm. I think I'm just I'm getting in a bit of a lull here in terms of like the fight nights. We had some pretty good fight nights I think over the summer. They've cooled a little more in the fall here, but at least things will pick up a week later when we get the UFC in Abu Dhabi, which will be during the daytime.
Yes, let's hope everyone makes it there.
Yeah, oh God. I have seen a lot of people are starting to fly out now. Aljamain Sterling flew out, I think, today or yesterday. I saw Jared Gordon tweeted a picture of himself on a plane to Dubai. I assume he's going for somebody.
Okay.
He's not. I don't believe he's on that card. Double check, but he just fought, so I don't think he's fighting.
Yeah, he might be just cornering someone.
I assume he's cornering. Let me double check though. I do not see Mr. Jared Gordon on here. He's got to be cornering somebody from the gym. Yeah, I don't know. But I do like that card. We'll talk about that one next week, of course.
Yep.
Yeah. But yeah, hey, we covered a lot of ground here, sir.
This was a nice sample size show, and not longer than normal.
No, this was good.
This was a good one.
And that does it for us. So make sure you tune back in next week. Now that you've got a sample of everything, we're probably going to do mostly some couchside or contested rounds next week. So be ready for that.
Yeah, we'll be back again Monday after everything. Thanks for listening.
Take care, everybody. Have a great week.